We saw Toronto police raiding the homes of activists who engaged in nonviolent demonstrations in Toronto. Berlin police raiding the homes of members of Samidoun, the prisoner support organization, Palestine Solidarity Group, seizing their funds electronically, debanking them. This is happening all across the West, but the UK really seems like a special case. I mean, it really feels like the UK has descended under the Daily Starmer regime into a kind of tyranny, and particularly a fear of everyone who exists outside of the Tory and Labour establishment. That's not just the left. You're seeing a lot of arrests of people on the right. I think a UKIP-friendly broadcasting station has left the UK, and Kit Clarenberg made this point about Sarah Wilkinson's arrest yesterday, which is that he's reminded of the British Army using a poster of Jeremy Corbyn for target practice. Britain has simply given up trying to hide its innate fascism. The 2019 election represented the last opportunity to change that democratically. This is the target, and British soldiers shooting at it. I'm also reminded of Mike Pompeo when he was CIA director, declaring that if Corbyn were elected as prime minister, the US would push back, in his words. So is Kit right? Is that the last chance to change the UK democratically in 2019? And where is the UK heading politically?
I mean, it is, of course, that was a very pivotal moment. You will remember this, allegations of anti-Semitism against Jeremy Corbyn, who again doesn't have a racist bone in his body. But that's what led to where we are now, because it's become, that there was already a culture of you can't say anything about Israel, but they put their foot down and they made an example out of him, right? That this is what it's about. It's about people with power making examples out of anyone who does otherwise or says otherwise or does something that they're not supposed to do. And if they can take out the head of the opposition, I mean, you can pretty much do anything then afterwards.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, so now it's like they did this to me with the Section 12, and then they thought, okay, there's a lot of outrage internationally, a ton of outrage, but BBC and Sky didn't say anything, so let's now proceed with the activists. And so they've gone after Sarah, they've gone after Palestine Action, and it was Section 12 with that exact one. So you can see it's being ordered from the top. It's being done in a systematic fashion, and it's all about taking attention away. Because even if it makes the government look bad, they would rather look bad inside of England than look bad for committing genocide in Palestine. This is how they calculate things, and I can't help but think to myself, if I had an address in England, would they have also sent 16 or God knows how many people to ransack the place? I think they might have felt tempted to do that. And that is not reassuring. We should not be feeling like this in our own countries. Well, we've done absolutely nothing wrong. This is a political offense. These designations are made up on the spot by a bunch of morons. And number 10, I mean, it's just, they have no meaning or basis in reality. So I'll just perhaps remind people one thing, that Netanyahu, who is the one committing this genocide in Gaza, attended a celebration in 2006 of the King David Hotel bombing. And that was the largest terrorist attack against British subjects in history. So, So much for allies,
Mass casualty event for the British Empire. Zionist terrorists from the Irgun, of which Benjamin Netanyahu's father was a member, bombed the King David Hotel in Jerusalem to drive out the British colonial authority, and then proceeded to enact a campaign of terrorism against indigenous Palestinians, culminating with the Deir Yassin massacre carried out by the Irgun. I should also mention Kit Clarenberg, our contributor at the Grayzone, was detained on terms very similar to yours when he was returning home to the UK to visit his family at Luton International Airport. Counter-terror cops digitally strip searched him, interrogated him about his work, about me, about the Grayzone. This was following a series of bombshell investigations that Kit published, which included leaks about Prevail Partners, consultants for the British Ministry of Defense, which were helping to manage Ukrainian sabotage and insurgency operations, including putting forward plans to bomb the Kerch Bridge, Kit had so many bombshell investigations, also about the Brexit campaign, exposing former MI6 director Richard Dearlove and a conservative cabal for violating the Official Secrets Act, spiriting classified documents out of Theresa May's own cabinet and leaking them. This was, something I thought the liberal press in the UK, The Guardian, would have been all over. And instead of reporting the revelations, they simply claimed that, somehow these leaks were the result of some vast Russian hacking operation. And that was the only news they could extract from it. And then, Kit was detained and a new law, the National Security Act, was passed, which effectively bans British journalists or criminalizes British journalists for reporting leaks that the national security state doesn't like. And also in the Commonwealth, acclaimed journalist Mary Kostakaitis is charged with anti-Semitism. She is charged with actual crimes in Australia for 2 retweets. This is Joe Laurie at Consortium News. For retweeting 2 tweets on X critical of Israel, famed Australian journalist Mary Kostakaitis is facing charges of allegedly violating the country's Racial Discrimination Act. The complaint to the Australian Human Rights Commission highlights just 2 Kostakaitis tweets from January this year, both of which contain a video of a speech by Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah in which he allegedly called for the ethnic cleansing of Israel. What he actually said was Israelis are not actually indigenous to Israel and that they're going to run away at the first sign of trouble. One of the retweets is from you, Richard Medhurst, who was arrested at Heathrow Airport and held for nearly 24 hours under the UK Terrorism Act this month. Medhurst is one of the most vocal critics of Israel's war on Gaza. The other tweet is from a user named Censored Men, who goes viral all the time. So do you see some connection between these two?
Well, in this case, I have to say no comment.
Okay.
Yeah. Like,
that speaks volumes. Your no comment speaks volumes.
About Mary specifically, she's very famous in Australia, and I love her for always being there with Assange's case. And it's so funny. It's like I remember one time no one had even thought to ask for the transcripts. In America, you can get court transcripts for free. It's easier. And in England, it's like it costs a fortune, and you have to get permission from a judge, and and she always thought of all these quote unquote small things, and she really worked hard to cover Assange's case, who is a compatriot. And the idea that she is racist or is like malfeasant, I mean, again, it's so preposterous. It is so beyond the pale. It's just like, it's laughable. It's just laughable. And I think this is it fits into the wider crackdown that we're seeing. Scott Ritter in the US, Palestine Action, Sarah, myself in the UK, Mary in Australia, and Pavel in France. What the hell is going on? This is not normal. Forget about Western values and democracy. It's just, this is not okay. You can call it whatever you want, but we should be talking about what's happening in Gaza, because they really have it the worst. And by waging lawfare against us, they get to achieve their goals in a certain way, where we're distracted instead of talking about those crimes. Not to say that this isn't important, obviously, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I see this in the shadow of 2016, Russiagate, the hysteria about Donald Trump being elected in 2016. That was not supposed to happen. Of course, Russia was blamed by the Hillary Clinton campaign in coalition with the national security state, John Brennan, former CIA director, and so on. And so there's this hysteria within the transatlantic elite about information that they can't control. There's a hysteria about the possibility of Donald Trump returning to power and shutting down the Ukraine proxy war, and just all the chaos that Donald Trump brings. And we can't escape the fact that this is an election season in the US, and that the US effectively manages the Nine Eyes and decides what takes place there, and that it is seeking to crack down on any information that it cannot control, which could potentially interfere with Kamala Harris's path to victory after the Democrats pulled off this coup of putting her in placing her there as the nominee. And you can see how they're controlling the press in the US. They have all the media, or we'll talk about this later, all the media organizations begging for an interview. She does one interview and it becomes this bonanza. She won't answer real questions. So it's all about the control of information, and you've risen to the level of a threat because you're breaking through. And I think when we look at the censorship requests that are being put into the big tech platforms, how our first live stream from the DNC, which was live from the protest, Wyatt Reed was on the ground. It was taken offline for a period. We were given a strike. Chris Hedges has had TikTok posts critical of Kamala Harris removed. Caleb Maupin had a series of essays he put up years ago about Kamala Harris, critical essays. It wasn't exactly a New York Times best-selling book. Amazon just without explanation removed his book. They're banning books that criticize Kamala Harris. And the White House has the power, as we know. Look up the case, Murthy versus Missouri. This was from the COVID era. Look up all the censorship requests the Biden administration placed to Meta and other groups, including over the Hunter Biden laptop.
Yeah,
we know they were doing this. So now it seems clear the Kamala campaign is using the power of the Biden White House to crack down on information, and the U.S. national security state is using the power of 9 eyes to just shut down all alternative voices, as many as they can, around the world, as well as trying to implicate the Palestine Solidarity Movement, which threatens Kamala's path to victory here, implicating them as somehow Iran-controlled. The director of national intelligence, Avril Haines, issued an intelligence bulletin claiming Iran is funding these protests without putting forward any evidence, because there is none and never will be any. So I don't know if you see it the way I see it, but I think this is very much influenced or being driven by panic about Donald Trump and so many other events that are in play this season.
Definitely involved, Max, without a shadow of a doubt. You can't disregard these giant things, because you're not just like speculating about these things. We saw them transpire. We've been seeing this happen for the last 4 years, right? And it's because it's an election season again that it's now flaring up. And I will add though that there is a certain degree of vindictiveness from the UK establishment that we can't disregard. But I was wondering to myself, because sometimes what the police will do is they'll call you in for questioning, or they'll drag you off a plane, and then they won't actually ask you about what it is they're really interested in. So they go on a fishing exercise, so to speak, and they prod, and we're very good at this in England. Like intelligence is our thing, and that obviously means not just knowing how to question people, but also, let me put it this way. I don't want to sound too paranoid, but after the spectacle of seeing, their phones bugged, I'm talking about the Palestine Action people, I wouldn't be surprised if they were also listening in on people's conversations with their lawyers. I mean, this is a thing in America. It's actually illegal if you're in special administrative measures. And they tried it. They tried it on with me when I was in the cell. So take a look at this. I was not allowed. I was incommunicado. Okay, like I was not allowed to speak to a family member or tell anyone that I was detained. The only thing I could do is give them a list of lawyers that I wanted to represent me or to come down, and then wait for them to call the lawyers. And I they come and check on you every like 45 minutes, and I say, did you call a lawyer? Can you just tell me what's going on? Because remember, I don't know why I'm here. And then finally, after a couple of hours, I'm allowed to speak to a solicitor, and they said they'll let my family know and call me back in an hour. Nothing. And I'm waiting. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to ask to call them. And this is already like 1 a.m, maybe, or something like that. So it turns out they did try to call, and no one picked up, or they rejected the call. Who knows? And then the following morning, I'm woken up by some noise in the cell. It's really like you're in 1984. They got calls coming out of the sink. I'm not joking. So they tried to put my lawyer's call, not in the room where you go to speak to a lawyer, where they take you out of the cell. No, they tried to do it through the sink or in the cell, and it's monitored, and they tell you. So, I was in a position like I'm literally in jail. I can't do it or say anything. So how could I protest that? But my solicitor was like, I'm not taking the call. and just like, slam the phone down. And then I said, well, can I call the solicitor back? Can you take me out there? And they didn't do that. So, it's just like all these basic rights, they're out the window. It's like it felt a little banana republic-ish, to put it mildly. And the thing is that in England, they're all civil about it. They'll smile and say, yeah, sure, we'll get you this and that. And then, unfortunately, that's how it is. But the thing is with terrorism cases, and this is in the US, it's equally true. They use it as a blank check to violate your privacy, your rights, everything. I've done nothing wrong, got nothing to hide. But I insist that they, especially with people who are journalists, that they respect their right to retain their tools. I mean, it's like a carpenter needs their hammers and their saws and everything. Well, we're journalists. We need our phones. We have confidential documents and sources we want to protect. We have, we've got drafts. Things, for example, I was working on that I was typing on my phone. I don't have them now. They've gone. Who knows what's going to happen with them? My microphones, they took everything, and that's disgusting. And I can't use them when I get them back because they're probably bugged. And I think that that costs hundreds, if not thousands. Who said that I have the money or that I have the will to make up for the police's bullying tactics? I mean, this is or the counterterrorism bullying tactics. I don't think that's okay. And what they did to Sarah as well, this destruction of property, is really so bullyish. I mean, what's going on? It's really Gestapo-like, as what they did to her, especially.
Well, it's also a form of slander, or it's also a form of kind of libeling you.
Yeah,
because they put you out there as someone who is suspicious, who maybe there's something there. People who work with you have to wonder, maybe there's something there. Maybe he is involved with the terrorists somehow. Anyone who doesn't completely distrust the state will start to wonder about you, and they can just interrogate you, question you, say, we're just investigating. The FBI can just show up at your house and never bring a case. They can also, in the US, they can make you an unindicted co-conspirator in a terrorism case and never have to bring charges against you, but that can be used against you for the rest of your life in the media. Certainly go up on your Wikipedia page, which is a megaphone for the national security state. So there are a lot of go ahead.
Max, I got to say something to that effect, because I was trying to understand, well, what's going on now? Where do we go from here? And apparently it's like, they could decide no further action in 3 months, but because I have to go back to the police station, right? So I have a date. They could decide no further action, or they could charge me, or they could just like keep extending their investigative period for 3 months and another 3 months, and keep you on edge. And you could stay silent for the rest of your life, and they could still charge you. So I don't think that that's acceptable. I don't think anyone should have to live with that dangling over their heads, and especially not journalists, and especially not in a country calling itself a democracy.
Well, we can see the mask of democracy, the very paper-thin mask, lifting one arrest at a time. Here in the U.S., where we do have a First Amendment, which makes it a little bit harder to get away with this kind of UK and French-style repression that we're seeing. Professor Danny Shaw, former professor, was detained and interrogated on August 28th by FBI and Department of Homeland Security officers at Chicago O'Hare Airport after he returned from the Free Palestine Film Festival in London. Danny's a friend of the show, and agents from the Chicago field office of the FBI grilled him for 3 hours about his Palestine solidarity activist, demanded to know the name of his contacts, any organization he's worked with, denied him the right to speak with a lawyer. When he refused to answer questions, they said, you won't be released till you comply. So your Miranda rights are immediately violated in the territory controlled by DHS between it's a legal gray zone, sort of
on the border,
kind of a gitmo. And he said the agent seized his cell phone, computer. They actually seized his passport as well as his notebooks, belongings, asked hundreds of questions about his work and personal life. And earlier this year in April, Danny Shaw was fired by John Jay College of Criminal Justice. He was a professor of Latin American studies. I mean, he's a really remarkable person. He's a former heavyweight boxer. He's fluent in Spanish and Creole. He has, is able to get on the ground in Haiti during uprisings there in ways that, a lot of Western journalists could not, with his command of language and understanding of the areas, as well as, he has, contacts within revolutionary movements in the Dominican Republic, places that are kind of neglected by the Western academia and the press. And he, obviously is in solidarity with Palestine, delivered a speech which the ADL distorted, painted as anti-Semitic, Stop Anti-Semitism, the Adam Milstein-backed doxing site run by racist Leah Rezchenko, called for his head, and John Jay College complied and fired him in April. So I think, is Israel triggering these detentions? What threat does Danny Shaw pose? And, what he seemed to be saying is that they wanted to know who he was connected to, and the FBI was sort of mapping out connections. Obviously, this is not limited to the UK, France, or Australia, places without the First Amendment. And this is about something much broader that all comes back to Palestine.
Yeah, I think it's insulting, honestly, that someone who is so qualified, as you just outlined, is then detained by people who don't even have 1/10 of the understanding, and then accused of an offense of the highest magnitude. And you were saying earlier, Max, you were talking about how Britain and MI6 specifically were funding a lot of these terrorists in Syria, the so-called,
and Libya.
And Libya. Yeah, well, I find it there is a certain irony, and I've mentioned this before, but I'm going to bring it up again because it annoys me. I got almost blown up. I mean, I'm a victim of terrorism because of Zawahiri blowing up the Egyptian embassy in Pakistan, and we all know who's behind Zawahiri and Bin Laden. People think it's just the CIA. It's not just the CIA. Wherever the CIA is, usually Britain is following closely behind, if not in front. So we know for a fact that Al Qaeda would have never even got off the ground without some form of British influence. And the idea that these spooks then have the nerve to stop me and call me a terrorist, I mean, this is so insulting and hypocritical. It's unbelievable. And it's like, the accusation itself, it's a form of libel or slander, as you were mentioning. They don't have to substantiate anything. But I think people are starting to understand that it's quite the opposite, and it doesn't make it any less, dehumanizing or less of an ordeal. And I'm not speaking about myself, but rather out of a heartache for what just happened to Sarah or to everybody who's been attacked or detained or had their home searched by the police. This is really unacceptable. We're descending into a dark age here. This is Gestapo-style tactics, and for what? For what? To protect Israel? Who cares? I mean, it's like, well, what do we even get out of this? It's just a lose-lose situation, and it's untenable for anyone who wants a free press. And if the journalists at the BBC and Guardian just did made a little bit of an effort, I don't think that police in England would be so keen to carry out more Section 12s. I think they would think twice.
Well, the special relationship with Israel is de-democratizing societies across the West, almost by design. This is what students have to look forward to at U.S. universities as they return to campus this September. And by the way, isn't it amazing how we didn't hear so much about the surge in anti-Semitism this summer? Somehow it just went away because I guess school was out, or maybe Zionists got what they wanted out of the university administrations that their billionaires control. Here is Indiana University, as part of its expressive activity policy, now bars protests within 25 feet of university buildings. University of South Florida bans all protests after 5 p.m. and during the final weeks of each semester. Vanderbilt bans demonstrations that require individuals to sleep or gather overnight. University of California, on 10 campuses, prohibits encampments. You can't wear masks. Cal State, same rules for 23 campuses. UPenn, University of Pennsylvania, my alma mater, no camping or overnight demonstrations. University of Virginia, banning tents on campus unless approved. All structures banned. James Madison University, no tents or other items used to create a shelter. UConn, University of Connecticut, not only bans encampments, but also tools used to amplify sound at outdoor gatherings. Syracuse, go ahead. I'm sure, you know, when they have like drunken riots, when the UConn Huskies win like the Final Four, they'll drop that ban on amplified sound at outdoor gatherings so they can play Taylor Swift or whatever. Syracuse University now requires authorization for on-campus use or assembly of tents, and so on and so on. They're really against tents. The only place they want tents to be, I guess, is in Gaza, where they keep blowing people's homes up. But this is the sham of the American university being exposed. They got what they wanted out of them, and so they're not howling about anti-Semitism like they were. I don't know what's happening in the UK. I know there were a lot of protests there on campuses across the UK, but really does seem clear that Israel and its cutouts across Western cities and countries really poses one of the most dire existential threats to whatever's left of free speech, Richard.
No, you nailed it, Max. Really, I can't stress this enough. It's like, even if you think, okay, what do I care about what Israel's doing with Palestinians? I don't care about Palestinians. No, you know, this is going to come back, and it's already coming back, and having a very negative effect on Western values, society, whatever you want to call it. Basically, your rights. Okay, so even if you want to be a selfish, because I'm trying to reason with people through different angles here. Even if you want to be selfish, your rights are being trampled on as a result of Western support for Israel. Because, you know, societies that engage in wanton violence like this, they erode. They end up destroying themselves. This is what happens. Everything goes, you know, towards militarism, towards genocide, towards occupation, and everything else crumbles. And that we're witnessing that right now. And universities, they're meant to be places of learning, places of debate, you know, places of higher education. I don't understand how you know, mass punishing all the students for having tents, and like you very eloquently said it, Max. You know, they only want tents in refugee camps in Gaza. I mean, they talk about irony. This is just so petty, and they just refuse to address the root cause, which is genocide. You know, banning all structures. What do they think? Someone's going to build a skyscraper in the, you know, outside? The problem is that the universities have interests with, you know, their financial interests. They're making money and they're investing in military corporations. I mean, forget the genocide in Gaza. Just as a matter of ethics, what place of higher learning should be doing that? You know, it's such a contradiction, and that in and of itself is another sign that we're headed in a wrong and in a very bad direction. And what makes me really sad is that in England, in the UK, it's like, you know, we like to think and boast about how, you know, we revolutionized the world with a million things by imposing it on everyone. And especially with law, you know, with common law, that you have rights, you have bail, you have the Magna Carta, you have all these lovely things. Man, whatever, if you think England is the greatest country on earth, well, guess what? I got very, very bad news for you, because fascism is already here. And I don't throw that word around lightly. I know people like to, you know, say it about Trump every second, and Trump has issues, but like, I'm really not just throwing that around lightly. Yeah. This is straight to fascism. You know, you got a Gestapo gang coming onto a plane and calling your name. You know, this is really, really not okay. And if I could discuss the questions or you know, allude to them, I think you would be twice as more, you know, if not 10 times as shocked. And all of it is about reporting, because you were mentioning before how some people detained about this and that. All of it was about journalism. And, you know, let me put it the way Scott said. Would you return the passport, you know, of a suspected terrorist or something, and let them leave on bail with no conditions if they were actually, you know, suspected of terrorism? No, of course not. And that shows you that I've done absolutely nothing wrong, and it was all to intimidate me. But the problem is, right, that reasoning doesn't necessarily hold up, because they really are out to get people. And I'm not comfortable with that, and I don't think anyone should be comfortable with that. We should all be enraged, because even if you're in the US, this is going to come there, and, you know, vice versa. This is really, really, really not good.